welcome everyone to a special edition of On the Bench with Columbus Wire. Dave Seaman along with Justin Boggs. We're taking full advantage of a rain delay out here at Muirfield Village to take a few minutes and talk about the NHL and, of course, the Columbus Blue Jackets. And let's start off, obviously, by talking about the Stanley Cup Finals. The Vancouver Canucks, 2 games up in the best-of-7 series against Boston. And thus far, it seems like it's been a pretty competitive Stanley Cup Finals, but Vancouver's been the team that's been able to get the timely bounce here and there.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the 2 goals they've scored. One came seconds before the end of regulation on Wednesday, Game 1, and then seconds after regulation in overtime in Game 2. But Vancouver has, I think, a superior amount of talent to Boston. I mean, you look at the lines they're able to roll, and that Sundin line with Burrows. I mean, they've been phenomenal, and Luongo, I think, is the best goalie in hockey right now.
And you talk about best, I think there's always that debate about best goalie. I mean, I think a lot of people would say that Boston's Tim Thomas is one of the best goaltenders in hockey. And really, when you look at Game 1, it was a goaltenders duel. And both goaltenders have really kind of stepped up.
They did, but of course Thomas made the ultimate mistake last night. He goes well out of the crease, and then Zdeno Chara does not stop Burrows. My opinion and the opinion of some others around here, they've said, just take the penalty. You slash a stick, you do something to stop that goal from going in. They didn't, Chara did not do anything to stop Burrows from scoring on that wraparound. Obviously, that's not Thomas's fault, but coming out of the crease like he did and slipping, that is his mistake.
Let's talk about Alex Burrows. Game 1, a little bit of a biting incident. We've seen it here in Columbus before. Should have you been suspended, do you think?
It's one of those things. These things happen. It's a physical game out there, and it's a battle out there. And you do notice that there's a little bit less fighting out there, but you do see a lot more scraps after whistles and guys jostling for position. It's a more physical game, but that isn't to say that it isn't clean. Sometimes you do have these little things happen, but let's be honest. Burrows is probably one of the top. He's become a top 10 center in this league very, very quietly. And between him and Kessler, I think Vancouver may have 2 of the top 10 centers in the National Hockey League.
Well, and you talk about centers, we do need to, of course, mention former Blue Jackets center, now, of course, the Canucks third-line center, Manny Malhotra, 3 months ago, hit in the eye with a puck, had 2 major surgeries. He played in Game 2 on Saturday night, and not a big contributor, but it was nice to see him back out on the ice.
He got a couple shots in the game, and he had some playing time, which is always good when you're getting back out there. He's considered one of the best defensive centers in the league, and he always has been, even when he was in Columbus. He's been defensively responsible. You pair him, you also have Kessler, who's another one of the top defensive centers in the league. So that's Malhotra. It was good to see that he was a good contributor on the ice after going through. I mean, he missed the entire playoffs. Think about how tough that is, how different the game is in the playoffs. Obviously here in Columbus, we don't get to see that very often.
Yeah, we saw a glimpse of it.
A little glimpse of it. We saw how difficult the playoffs truly are.
Well, and I mean, when you talk about that, 3 former Blue Jackets play for the Canucks. Of course, we mentioned Malhotra, Raffi Torres, and Aaron Rome, the other 2. All 3 played for Columbus in that playoff run, and they're finally really kind of getting to see what it's like to play playoff hockey.
I wonder how different this team would be, how the Blue Jackets would be, if they had Malhotra and Torres still on the squad. If those guys were still on this, I think the season would have been completely different. Especially you think about what Malhotra brings to your team. He's not a high-end scorer. He's always, when he played here, he played on that top line quite often, and we saw what happened. He was paired with Nash and Hyselius there for the longest time, but he's able to elevate his game. He is a great role player, but he was able to elevate his game at times to be a first-line center if he really needed to be. But just imagine him here, if you had him here as that third-line center instead of a Sammy Paulson. Malhotra's talent level is well above what Paulson gives you.
And we of course talk about the Stanley Cup Finals. The other newsworthy thing to come out of the offseason thus far is the sale of the Atlanta Thrashers. The Thrashers moving to Winnipeg next season. They were bought and sold or moved or are being moved, and that could have a direct effect on the Columbus franchise. Maybe not this year, and the NHL's already come out and said there will be no realignment in 2011-2012. But a year from now, we could very well see the Columbus Blue Jackets move to the Eastern Conference.
Well, the whole reason for that was they still don't know what's going to happen in Phoenix. And $25 million bailout, Phoenix's direction. The NHL still has a lot of faith in the Phoenix market that they can come back and they can draw a crowd there. You know, the location there is not the greatest. It's a little bit of a drive from downtown Phoenix, but you know, Quebec is really lobbying for a team. They were, you know, there was folks from Quebec in Columbus throughout the season trying to get the Blue Jackets to move there, if that tells you anything. So Phoenix is certainly a team, a franchise that could be up for relocation once again after this season. And if they go to Quebec, then you have Columbus or whatever squad, Nashville, Detroit, one of those squads move to the east for one season, then you have to move them back to the west. That really doesn't do you a whole lot of good.
Finally, as we kind of wrap up here, you know, we have to at least mention the Blue Jackets and talk about the new off-season news thus far. I mean, we're really getting ready to go into a critical month with the Blue Jackets. I mean, we have the entry draft coming up in 3 weeks, and then free agency starts July 1st. The next, I would say, 5 to 6 weeks, we've got to see a lot of movement with Scott Housen and this in the hockey side of things.
Well, you expect that, but you know, most really importantly, the story came out today that many of the scouts are up, and that's been a big weakness for this squad over the years. And you know, you wonder if they're going to have another draft day blunder. You know, look at they've had more busts in the draft than they've had hits, and even more recently, you look at like a John Moore, for instance, who was supposed to be this dynamite defenseman, and he's spending a year, you know, as a minus defenseman in Springfield. They have had so many busts in these drafts, and this, you know, they're still holding out for Ryan Johansson. There's going to be a lot asked of the kid when he comes in this year at 19 years old. You have to expect right now that they're going to look toward him as a center, as one of the maybe even top 2 centers on the squad this year. That's a lot to ask for of a 19-year-old who has never played in the NHL.
Well, you can point back to Nikita Filatov. Here's a guy who's supposed to be our savior 2 seasons ago, last season, and you know, I don't think that he's an NHL player at this point.
And Hitch handled that situation pretty well, it turns out. Everyone blasted Hitchcock for how he handled that. They thought that he just wasn't helping the young players out, and then Arniel, a month into the season, says, go down to Springfield and work on your game a little bit.
And hopefully the next time we talk, Ken Hitchcock may be the head coach somewhere else and we can get his money off the books.
Absolutely. I mean, they're still paying for Doobie Westcott, you know, if that tells you anything. They have $3.5 million being owed to Mike Commodore.
I was just going to say Mike Commodore's under contract for 2 more years.
So right now, you know, you're spending $6 million on guys who aren't helping your team.
Well, Justin, always a pleasure. You know, a chance to, like I said, we have a few minutes here as we're battling the rain at Muirfield. No surprise there, but stay tuned to Columbus Wired over the next couple weeks and months as we continue to give you off-season coverage. And of course, you know, as the finals continue, you know, the countdown to opening night begins.
That's right. Look forward to seeing hockey once again.
For Justin, this is Dave. So long, everyone.